Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Roger's Real-Time Talk Show event. Today we have Bob Dub and Mark Edworthy with us. Auto Excelsior is going to be here in a little bit, and we are going to continue on what we ended or finished off on last week, which was a very interesting conversation because, in my humble opinion, I think our anarchist just kind of whooped the other one's butts. She just dove in and just tore them up. So I don't know. I mean, it was, what do you think, Mark? Do you think that was the case?
I've got to remember last week's conversation. It's been a long time. I think it was a fairly, um, I can't think of the word, fairly balanced conversation.
Yeah, I do too. I agree. Now,
Mm.
we are going to do the same format as before. We'll each have approximately about 2 minutes to, make our talking points. If we don't bring talking points to the show, then we can bounce off of what everybody else has discussed, with our comments and stuff for about 2 minutes. And then after, like, we do our talking points, it will let each of the other people on the panel have about 2 minutes to comment on what we've said, and then we have 2 more minutes to talk back to what their feedback is. So basically back and forth, and we'll go around the room, and each of us will do the same process and blah blah blah. Also, since Bob Dub made the comment about anarcho on anarcho syndicalism, or however you pronounce that, I'm
Mm.
just going to refer to it as syndicalism. Okay, because we don't want to get her mad again. She just went off the wall, dude. So, and we appreciate that too. You kept us on our toes. You told us, okay,
Thank you, Roger.
you're welcome. So, before we start, you guys want to say hello?
Hey guys, awesome to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me back, Roger. It was not my intention to whoop your ass.
I like how she said that. They wouldn't say stuff like that in England, would they, Mark?
Indeed. So it depends on which sort of community you're in. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've just been reading through the notes for today's show, and quite a lot in there.
You know,
So yeah, just looking forward to it.
no, I'll read through it and everything to get it started up. And if you don't want to discuss every single talking point or part of the talking point, you don't have to. You know what I mean? It's just I put it on there and I'll read it through. And if something catches your attention, you can discuss it. If not, then fine. But the reason why I wanted to do that is because I believe me and Mark have to take a walk with one another. Because he mentioned the Labor Party, and it just amazes me how little English people know about their own country. You know what I mean? And so I'm gonna have to kind of fill them in on this deal with the, what was it, the NDF,
Or SDF, or
SDF. Yeah,
what I would know as the SDP.
yeah. Now that
SDP is more of a common name.
now that
Uh,
it gets into a pretty interesting thing too. So, but with that, I'll just open up the talking points I have. And the first one, it starts off with what we were discussing about the industrial unionism, syndicalism as a method for workers in a capitalistic society to gain control over an economy and thus control influence on a broader society. The goal of syndicalism is to abolish the wage system, regarding it as wage slavery. Now, the syndicalist theory generally focuses on the labor movement, and this is something that I do want to stop for a second and point out. When they talk about like wage slavery, I kind of find that ironic that they want to call it wage slavery, because like I was thinking about it all the time that we had our last conversation, and it was like, so they're going to take away our wages, give us the house they think we should live in, give us the car we think we should live in, the amount of food they think we should have, and then make us work for free. You know what I mean? So now we're not a wage slave, we're just a slave, a free slave. We're going to go to work and we're going to do all this work because we love the government so much, and that's something that really stuck out to me. And another thing in the in the last episode that rings out to me is on our conversation, if you guys notice, it talks about people working. It doesn't mention anything that refers to free. You know what I mean? There is nothing free in this kind of a system. You work, and that's it. So that I ponder on the question of what do they do to people, or how do they handle the people that just don't want to work? You know what I mean? I was homeless on the streets. I know, I can tell you honestly, I have no lie. I don't have to lie about it. I just didn't want to work. So with a person like that, how would they deal with them in a society like this? You know what I mean? Because, and don't get me wrong, I know that the welfare system was incorporated into it later on, but I'm talking about this at this stage and at this time. How would they have dealt with the homeless and people who didn't want to actually work and things of that nature? So with that, I'm going to hurry up and do some more reading before I run out of time. I may have ran out of time. Now, the Labour Party in England, this has to do with the Social Democratic Federation, the SDF. It did play a role in the formation of the Labour Party in England, but it was not the sole entity responsible for its creation. The Social Democratic Federation was established as Britain's first organized socialist party by H.M. Hyndman, and its first meeting was on 7 June of 1881. Those joining the SDF included William Morris, George Lansbury, James Connolly, and Eleanor Marx. However, Frederick Engels, Karl Marx's long-term collaborator, refused to support Hyndman's venture. Many of its early leading members had previously been active in the Manhood Suffrage League, which I've heard a little bit about that, but I don't know much. The SDF battled through defections of its right and left wings to other organizations in the first decade of the 20th century before uniting with other radical groups in the Marxist British Socialist Party from 1911 to 1920. Despite the weakness of its adult organization, the SDF was instrumental in the development of the movement of socialist Sunday schools for children, institutions which taught socialist ideas and ethical principles to youngsters in competition with various denominations Sunday schools. During this interval, the SDF experienced the atrophy of its ultra-parliamentary right wing to the Independent Labour Party, the ILP, more heavily influenced by Christian socialism than by the atheistic Marxism of the SDF. The ILP also had the advantage of having Hardy as a member of the House of Commons after winning the West Ham South seat in the 1892 general elections. This enabled the ILP to argue that it was a more effective vehicle for change than the SDF. Prominent figures such as Henry Hyde Champion, Bennett Tillett, Jim Connell, and George Lansbury all left the SDF for the ILP. And I'm gonna stop it right there because I think I got through there. I could go into the British Socialist Party, which was
Mm.
actually another step that happened before they technically became a prominent member of the Labour Party. So um, maybe later on, if we have enough time to go around, I'll bring it up. But since Otto is here, I wanted to welcome him here and let him know that his uh, mic is muted. So if he wants to unmute it, that's cool. And now, what I
Hey, I just got in. I was on a little road trip. We got delayed. So I'm actually kind of busy settling wifey down for the night because she's getting ready to crash. I'm doing a couple things here.
okay,
So my presence is going to be a little intermittent probably for the next 5 or 10 minutes, but
okay.
I am here. I am here. Just walked in the door long ago.
We wanted to welcome you at least, so we've been waiting.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so
Okay, yeah, I'll be with you guys in just a few minutes. I just got a couple things I got to clear up here, but I want to let you know I am here, and thank you for welcoming me. And I'll talk to you guys very shortly. Bye
okay,
bye.
so with with that, I am going to open it up. Now, last time we did Bob Dub first, so this time I'll start it up with Mark and let him make his comments because this is something we've actually talked about too, and he could give me a little bit of feedback. So,
Uh, First of all, I just want to apologise. I made the mistake earlier of calling the SDF SDP. But I was thinking of the Social Democratic Party that was formed in 1981, which was a offshoot of Labour. Um, so yeah, I got the one party. I only just realised when you were talking about the 1890, whatever year it was.
okay. So,
Um,
so what do you think? Anything about what I just said cross your mind?
the names that you mentioned are interesting. People like Eleanor Marx, Engels, and Lansbury, Morris. Um, just trying to remember some of the things. I'm just trying to remember some of the things, but I can't think at the moment.
Well, we can come back to you later on if you want
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Please do.
Okay. So since I don't have to have much of a conversation with Mark, that makes it a little bit easier for us to get through. Like he usually has a lot to say, but oh, Roger finally was able to shut him up. I think I should like freaking make this a monumental day because I've never been able to shut Mark up
It's been a long day, and I've had very little coffee today, so
ever.
that's my excuse.
Okay, I'll open it up to you, Bob Dub. Anything from that sticks out to you by any chance?
Well, I was interested in your first 2 points, particularly, Roger, where you talk about the wage slavery and people who don't want to work. I think those are huge, huge, important things. It's interesting to me that the start of these talking points starts off with the syndicalism as a method for workers in a capitalist society to gain control of an economy. I've been looking at that sentence since you first published these talking points, and I've just thought that for me, it's so fascinating that somebody came along and tried to disrupt the way the system had evolved in an artificial way. And I wonder what would have emerged in Britain if they had allowed the organic growth of capitalism and if they hadn't tried to disrupt it by transferring power to the workers. Because from an anarchistic point of view, you want a hierarchy. You want the people at the top of the hierarchy to be doing their job of management and leadership. And you want the workers to be involved to the extent of their capacity down at the bottom of the pyramid. So to try and take the workers and put them up to the top of the pyramid, from our point of view, is quite a cruel and disruptive thing to put on workers. There's a lot of things that you need to consider if you want to do something like revitalize a society, and transferring control of the economy might be the last thing you want to do. You might want to look at education, nutrition, educating mothers, giving support systems for families, all sorts of things. But to jump into a system and start throwing money around as if you think you know what you're doing is perhaps a very arrogant way of behaving in our point of view. So that was the one thing that I sort of thought. The other thing about the people who don't want to work, I feel that there's a really, and again, a really important element in that that's being overlooked. And that, to me, is the why. Somebody who doesn't want to work is in a place where work is not exciting them for a reason. When the person has dealt with whatever those issues are, one of the first things that happens to them after they've emerged from that is they start wanting to work. So, from my point of view, these things are not about the exterior symptoms, shall we say, of the society or the economic system, but more about the individual, the empowering each individual to willingly take part in the system at the level that they wish to take part. Okay, that's kind of my initial
Well,
contribution, Roger.
I'm glad you said that stuff because first of all I said it in the last episode and I'll say it again, it just trips me out that when I hear you talk and what I've actually been finding out in the last two episodes about anarchism. Yeah, and like it just trips me out that there was a structure. You know what I mean? Like there were rules that were involved in like the things that I've been finding out. It just blows me out of the water because my whole concept of what anarchy was is just completely disrupted. And also there was some other stuff in there that you said that really stuck out to me, like the man. I wish I was actually listening good, but like the whole thing with the you were talking about the slavery and stuff, the slave wages, and then when it comes to like people not wanting to work, okay, it also for me comes down to like that they aren't really given the opportunity to do what they really want to do. You know what I mean? Like for me, I love doing what we're doing here. I also love getting on the internet and freaking, editing videos and being a part of that. But because I didn't go to school and get an education with degrees, I'm not permitted to do that. You know what I'm saying? And I find that also another part of socialism that really disturbs me is the fact that freaking people have to have certification in order to get a job in that field, and a lot of people disagree with me about that, but it is the truth. That is a form of socialism. You can call it bureaucracy, whatever you want, but it's still freaking socialism. So
I find socialism to be a very violent system.
Mm-hmm.
It disrupts the natural growth of communities.
Mm-hmm.
It walks in with an arrogance and it tries to reverse engineer an ideal system. Whereas if you trust in people and you trust in the goodness of human nature, not idealistically, but just as far as you can trust, you trust in it, then you will see that when you plant a seed, a tree will grow. I think you're the one that taught me that, Roger.
Right. Otto's back, so no,
Just before we go drop to
it's
Otto, I just want to come
it's
back on a few
it's your
points.
turn actually, dude. Like like
Okay.
we haven't even made it to you. It's
Sure.
your talking point. So you got your talking point, and you say it now as a talking point. What you have in your mind.
Okay. I'll go in reverse order of what Doug was saying. Socialism being violence or being forced. Um, sure, that's correct when it comes to extreme socialism. But socialism made up of a collective of, let's say, a very localized sort of group that all agree to, I don't know, chop down a tree or something. There's no violence in that. There's no, um, unless it's being enforced top down. If it's being sort of agreed upon from the bottom up, then it's just an agreement between multiple people. Um, I was watching a documentary last night, actually, about the Mars Corporation. I think it's Mars Corporation, the people that makes the chocolate bars and stuff. Um, about how they've lobbied the US Federal Drugs Administration about what is healthy, about what if E numbers are acceptable in food and stuff. And I was just thinking about the idea of corporate um, capitalism taking control of our democratic system. So in this case, Mars just giving money to what is essentially a corrupt governmental agency. Anyway, at least in my opinion. And then that government agency not working on behalf of the citizens, but working on behalf of the company. Um, when you were talking about what would have happened if there was no such thing as socialism in Britain during the 19th century, late 19th century, I'm thinking of the idea of, again, corporate capitalism. But I'm also thinking that during the 19th century, there were things like workhouses. So if you were in debt to a severe limit, then yeah, you were sent to a prison or workhouse. And we still, both in the UK, America, or Australia, all Western countries, have a big issue with homeless people population even now. Um, Final point, wage slaves. What's the difference between a wage slave and an indentured servant?
All right. So is that the what you want to pose to everybody to where they can make comments?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we are going to do this the cool way. Now Otto's here, so he can give us his hip up-to-date version, and then we'll come around to me, and then to Bob Dub, and Bob Dub will give us all a butt whooping.
Okay. Well, I'm getting a little late, but I did overhear some of the conversation, and something that struck me that Bob was saying earlier, and I think it applies to everything we're talking about today, because it seems like we're talking about capitalism. And one thing I, at least my opinion about it is that I think that we, in these conversations, and it's natural enough to do, but I think we overstress the economic aspect of things. And I think this is because of Marx, who, no matter what else you think about him, did bring economics. He was one of the people, not just him, but he was one of the people that really brought economics to the fore about how we think about history, how we understand social processes and cultural processes. So we, and I think I said this last time too. I tend to take a more of a third position, more like a distributionist or something idea that capitalism in and of itself is simply an aspect of our culture. It really, got out of control at one point, and I think that's because the other checks and balances in the culture were upset. And capital all of a sudden, and this is basically not so much through the money itself, but through the productivity of the Industrial Revolution, because we all know here that real wealth is not money, but it's productivity. It's the ability to create things. So this concentrated wealth very, very highly. And I overheard Bob talking about, what a more natural kind of a system, a capitalist system would be. And I would say it would be a system with capitalism in it. And my first thought was of ancient Norse society, which I know a little about. I've done some reenactment, 10th century Icelandic. And in that society, I mean, that's not what we would call, technically speaking, a capitalist society, but they traded and so forth. But talking about like the people that didn't want to work. Well, they had people that didn't want to work in these Norse communities. And again, these are communities. They're very small. They're subsistence farmers. Life is very, very hard. Now, there's always people that don't want to work. But the thing about people that don't want to work, and you probably noticed this, is they still have to work. They just put off doing any kind of work until they do the bare minimum of what they need just to survive. They don't really want to put on that jacket, but it's going down below zero tonight. So they're going to, that sort of thing. So in Norse society, these are the people that you often hear described sometimes as slaves. They're not really slaves the way we think of chattel slavery. They're just the people and again, these are communities of like 25 people sometimes. These are not big communities. They're the people that are basically, they don't want to work. They're very lazy. They might not be so bright. So it's like, all right, Sven, you go get the water from the river. Sven, you go. Basically, the guy that he's pushed down to the bottom of the pecking order. But at the same time, he's not going to eat any worse. In fact, he probably eats better because he's helping in the kitchen. And he's still going to be sitting in the sauna at night listening to stories. He's just not up front. He's back near the door, but he can get to the jakes more easily from there. So people would find a little, and we could say, oh, look at this poor guy. He's wearing rags. People call him names. They throw bones at him in dinner, which apparently was a Norse thing. If you read the sagas, if there was a guy that was like at the bottom of the pecking order, they get drunk, and they would throw bones at him, and he'd walk past, chicken bones and stuff. So anyway, yeah, they would say, oh, he's so terribly, terribly treated. But at the same time, in that society, in that time when people could starve to death very easily, just having a place to live and sleep and where you still have a place. So I think that might be a glimpse. It would be something where people who needed to be taken care of would be taken care of within the norms of the culture. And Mark was mentioning the workhouses, and the workhouses. I jotted it down. They were an old solution that did work. And I talked about this before. In Elizabethan times, the parish took care of everything, and you would have a place where you could go and maybe a little workhouse. They tried applying this to the mass industrialization in the cities. And again, it was an old solution that didn't work anymore because there were new problems. But I would say the big problem with capitalism, and I think this is how you would look at it in a pre-Marxian way or a non-Marxian, non-economic, non-Lockean way, looking at it aside from economic theory. What you're looking at in capitalism is a failure of the people in whom that wealth was concentrated to use the wealth wisely on behalf of the community. And humans have a long tradition of that. All those aqueducts and roads in Rome, those were built by private citizens. And in the golden age of ancient Greece, they would pick the wealthy men. You're in charge of this chorus or this sacrifice. And a sacrifice, as I was talking about last time, that was a way that you fed people. So you're bringing up 20 or 30 bulls for this big annual sacrifice, and everybody in the city, no matter how poor, is taking home a pound of meat. So they're going to be eating. But it was the rich guy that paid for it all. I was talking about, I think, about how feudalism, the whole idea that you had a really deep obligation to the community, no matter what your rank, became bastard feudalism. In Elizabethan times, when capital became more important, money as a commodity became more important, and everyone wanted to be ennobled. And there was the guy, he was wealthy, he had bought this old estate, but they wouldn't give him a coat of arms because his gate was not greasy enough. He wasn't feeding the poor like he was supposed to, like had been done there for hundreds and hundreds of years before. Then he comes in, it's like, I'm not going to give those poor people something. So capitalism is an amazing tool. It's a description of an economic activity, but I don't think it's good to look on it as an ideology. You can look on it as an ideology, but it's a very empty one, and it's not. I don't think it's something that's conducive to good human relationships. We have to make it into a tool again. So, and I'm going to keep going if I don't stop me. But about socialism and what Bob was saying about socialism harming communities, I think the problem with socialism is an attempt to replace the community, and I don't think it's inherent. I don't think they're sitting around plotting this. But the thing is, again, always get back to the parish. People took care of their neighbors. Communities took care of themselves. They were very stable. You didn't have people moving in and out all the time. You especially didn't have, as they call them, newcomers now coming in, which always causes dissension. And Bob, you had this experience yourself. When newcomers come in, you don't know who to trust anymore. Even your friends that were your friends are, whose side are you on? It destabilizes everything. So these small communities would take care of their own. And the idea behind what I've seen of socialism is you just transfer all that care to the state, and then they basically codify all these relationships, which in real life are very subtle, ever-changing, and are always spontaneously balancing themselves. And that's where not just socialism, but any governmental, here I'm going to my anti-authoritarian thing, but really any attempt to enforce social norms from above is going to have these shortcomings. That's going to be, restrictive. It's not going to be good. Whereas if you allow these things to arise spontaneously and organically, I think they will tend to settle into a pattern that you might not call politically correct, but which takes care of as many members of the community as it can. So I think that was it. I just ran out of notes.
Well, I mean, that really wasn't your time for your notes, so you're going to be back with some more stuff. You were just commenting on Mark, so you did a good job.
Yeah, I was listening and I was taking notes of Mark and Roberta, so I was like, oh yeah, okay. These are all my ideas I had when I was listening to them. The workhouses got me going.
So Mark, do you have anything in response to what Otto said?
Yeah, couple of things. In relation to the newcomers question, I think, especially in the UK, it seems like we are seeing all these, let's call them newcomers, just for the sake of being friendly. There is there's a creation of ghettoization, which creates a lack of trust within the larger societies or within towns and cities, which also damages social cohesion. I am not a fan of the Blairist concept of multiculturalism, multiracialism. Fair enough, but multiculturalism can be extremely damaging to a country such as the UK that has a long history of a certain culture. In relation to doing the most minimum thing to constitute as work. Um, I coming from a more of a sort of corporate sort of background and being a big fan of Scott Adams, Dilbert cartoons. Um, I was thinking of all the 1990 concepts of the sort of work smarter, not harder principle.
Yeah.
And just before and after COVID, there was a lot of discussion about the sort of quiet resignation, quiet quitting concept. I go into the office, do the most minimum amount of work that you're contracted to do, and then do nothing more.
Yeah. Well, there is that work
Yeah.
smart that I've always agreed with. I like what you know when I was talking about the newcomers, I was thinking, and this gets to our Shakespeare talk about the when the Dutch weavers were coming into London. That was one of the things that the government cracked down on somebody, and they were trying to chase it, trace it to Kidd or Marlowe or one of those guys had written, we don't want these foreigners coming here. They're taking our jobs. They're destroying our country. And the government came down, back then it was torture, star chamber stuff. So cracking down on any kind of dissent about that sort of thing is not new. But I did like your comment about multiculturalism versus multiracial, because a lot of people, and I know a lot of people, are strict ethno-nationalists. And the thing is, I can understand the ethno-nationalist arguments, and I can even see where ethno-nationalism, certainly it'll work. It's for most of human history. But at the same time, I'm from the United States. I'm very used to a multi-ethnic society. All the division going on otherwise. I mean, I'm from New York City. Just where I grew up and the jobs I've had or stuff, I'm very used to being people who are many different ethnicities, but all the same culture. And that's the thing that we all go on about. No matter what your shape, size, color, race, this or that, you're still going to be talking about the same. I mean, even stuff like the same football game, same concerns about work at home. I think that there are ways to make a multiracial society work very well. But I think the key is, like you say, it's the culture. If human beings can share a culture in good faith, they can do anything together. And again, I do understand that in many countries, and there are many different places in time and space, no, they did not have a multi-ethnic society. It's just not going to happen. But I don't think it's I don't think it's an impossibility. And I see it as a place, especially like the United States, which has all the ingredients you need for a successful multi-ethnic society, simply the way we have, our theory of government and our theory of rights and so forth and so on. And yeah, we got a shaky start. What the hell? We're the products of our times. But it's, the system, I think, here in many ways had a potential to really look past the, as the philosophers say, the individual accidents of like birth, and rather look to people working together as good citizens together. And they did get this, and all my conspiracy theory friends will be going on crazily, but this is really actually part of the Freemasonic idea, which, in the wake of things like the 30 Years' War and the horrible religious anxiety in Britain at the time over the Stuarts and the Orange and the Protestants and the Catholics and this and that, in the Masonic lodges that finally evolved, you didn't talk politics. You didn't care what a man's politics were. You didn't care where he came from. My grandfather was a 32nd degree Mason, and he was very proud to be in a lodge with people of different ethnic backgrounds, different religious ideas. He thought that was the most wonderful thing on earth. He always had to praise men of good faith can come together, no matter what their individual faith might be, and work together in harmony. And I think that, but you do need that cultural unity. I think that really is the key there. And, I agree completely with Mark about that. It's a fine distinction. People don't really get that sometimes.
It's tricky.
No,
I think that this.
no,
Sorry,
no.
Roger.
Hold on a minute now. See, she,
Yeah.
she's got excited. Now, we are taking turns here, so I'm going to do my turn now. And what you guys had brought up, it made me think of a couple things too. Now, one thing that's being forgotten is that during that time period, they were moving from imperialist government to what they referred to as classical conservative. Okay, now
Mm.
conservatism today isn't the same as what it used to be. Classic conservatism in England was actually people who still wanted some form of imperial government that was in line, but also in a conservative manner. You know what I'm saying? So there was that, like, and a lot of people really don't understand that. Like, there is a term called classical conservatism. So and
I'm thinking more feudalism, but yeah,
yeah,
same sort of concept.
and then another thing that, like, we were talking about, Mark brought up the the housing or the poor and stuff like that, and how they had the debtors prisons and stuff. That's another good thing to discuss too, because when it comes to that kind of a system, you got to ask yourself, where did that originally come from? You know what I mean? And today you can find it in some states, like in Indiana. They still have a law that they put into place where if you owe somebody money and you don't show up for court to be accountable for why you can't pay that bill, you can go to jail. You know that, and
Wow.
yeah, and they have those kind of laws set up all over the United States. That's the one thing about Indiana I disagree with about that, because that takes you back to this debtor's prison, kind of a
Mm.
mentality, in my opinion. And they can't put you in jail for not paying your bills, but they can put you in jail for failure to appear if you don't show up for court. So each time you're supposed to go to court, you need to show up. See, and they find loopholes like that because they want that kind of conservatism in their form of government. And you know, that was something that has always stuck in my craw since I actually lived in Evansville, Indiana. I lived there for a stint, and that really stuck out to me because I owed past money to an apartment complex that I needed to pay back up, and they eventually took it to court to where I literally had to show up for court because I didn't have that freaking bill paid off. And I was like, this is completely outrageous, you know what I mean? But I showed up for court. And if I didn't show up, they would have put a warrant out on me and had me put in jail until the next court appearance. But that's my comment.
Awesome.
Now you get to talk again, Mark.
I'm just thinking, when you're talking about being in prison for not turning up to court, would that not be technically a form of contempt of court?
Yes, that would be contempt.
Oh yeah, yeah. Which is
Over a
if
civil.
you commit contempt, yeah. Well, it'd be a criminal action, wouldn't it? Because there's an imprisonment thing.
No, see, the interesting part about that is if it was a criminal action, I would understand it. But this is a civil court issue that they have turned into a form of criminal action.
Yeah, normally in a civil case, they wouldn't do that to you. I mean, I have a friend of mine who is going through a divorce. The wife doesn't show up for the civil case. They don't issue a bench warrant. So they're applying the law selectively, it seems like to me.
You know, so.
But it's the law. The judge can do that. And if he's buddies with the apartment complex guy, they probably play golf together.
No, it's state law.
Actually, I just checked. It is under U.S. law. It is a criminal action under U.S. Code 18, Title 18, Section 401. Contempt of court. It's got a lengthy.
Well, see, okay. Let me elaborate on that a little bit more. See, contempt of court is against the law, but they created a loophole. Instead of trying to get you to go to jail for not paying your bills, they can freaking force you to go to court each day, or for each time that you need to show up. Okay? And then if you don't show up for court for that case, then you can be put in jail for contempt of court. Not for the bill, but for not showing up for court.
Mm.
So
Mm.
so until that bill's paid, you need to show up for court. It's a loophole in the justice system. Is basically what I feel it is.
That's an arguable point. I'm just thinking of using a criminal element within a civil case. And then technically, wouldn't you need another? Wouldn't you need an actual criminal court to ascertain if it was a criminal action?
Mm-hmm.
So if I commit a offence of contempt in a civil case, and the judge decides on that, wouldn't he have to refer it to a criminal judge?
You would think.
And therefore, a additional court case.
Mm-hmm. So I'm done. You want to drill him, Bob Dub? Like kick his butt real good, cause.
I think I'll try a different move. Okay, I don't want to just be a one-trick pony here. Okay, so I thought that it was really interesting what Mark was talking about with trust in a trustless society. And I feel that we started off when we started building our societies back in the caveman days. We started off in these small groups of people where we knew who was who, we knew who would work and who wouldn't work, because this one was pregnant and that one had cancer and this one had lost his wife and those guys couldn't work. So we were going to carry it for them until they came back to us. We started there, and we were so successful as a species that we got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until we stopped knowing whose dog was dead and whose kid was sick in hospital. And so now we live in this world where we interact like this internationally. We have a lot of different countries represented here amongst the four of us this morning. And it's so big. We're no longer in small communities. We've had to open our minds up and ask ourselves, what is it about our common humanity that binds us as a culture? This is where we're at right now. We've transcended countries and national boundaries, and we've walked into the identity of being human beings together, one species, beyond race or culture. However, that's come with the sacrifice of knowing what's happening within the community. And so there is a need, a desperate need for somebody to develop some sort of system where we would be able to generate trust within this trustless environment that we now live in. So we're looking at maybe a system where things are carefully encoded, or maybe with cryptography or something. Maybe we would need a ledger for transactions that could be cross-referenced between different people, a place where things were completely transparent so that you couldn't commit fraud or something to pull. There's just a lot of space here for some very ingenious, technologically minded people to develop a system that would provide us as individuals with a way that we could generate this sort of trust within a trustless society. So that was, I think, one of the things that Mark's comments triggered in my mind. And then I'd like to mention something that you said, Otto, earlier when you were talking about Karl Marx. I think that you said that Karl Marx made it about the economy. He talked about the economy, and so we started having this conversation about like who gets the money and where's this and where's that. And I think that even though that's a very interesting conversation and it has cost millions, millions of human lives. And I just like to point out that anarchy has cost zero in the history of mankind. But Marx's ideas led to a lot of death. Now, the problem with Marx was that even though he had a brilliant mind, his life was a disaster. And so
Yeah.
this comes back again to what I was saying earlier about these systems of governance that we have that are based on economies and generating and production and working, and they're missing something. They're missing the fact that we need to be good people. Maybe if somebody was generating a way that we could develop trust in a trustless society, that change might mean that we would have to enter into a new system with a different way of being human in this world, a way that doesn't look at money and production, but looks at interrelationships and looking out for other people and giving of yourself instead of giving of your labor, different things. And so we're in a huge melting pot and we're dealing with newcomers. And as we raise more people out of poverty, we will have more newcomers. So I think that it's unbelievably exciting that we are able to group together like this and have these discussions and look so deeply into what it means to have a successful community. There we go. That's my thought, Roger. Thank you. Back to you.
Uh, it's going back to you, Mark. You're in trouble, dude. You got to respond to that. I,
Okay, yeah. Bob, when you talk about I can't remember the exact words you used, but everybody's sharing a similar culture. Um, that sounds very sort of globalist, globalist concept. I mean, I was just checking. In the US, people drive on the right-hand side of the road, whereas in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia, we drive on the left. I still enjoy a Sunday roast. Whereas most Americans wouldn't even know what Sunday roast is. Um, um, there are cultural nuances that are distinctive to each individual country
Yes.
or each individual territory. Also, you're looking at this from a very westernized viewpoint, I think, because if you think of the sort of more, let's say, well, let's say Islam from a theologic political stance, where the idea that they would, or the extreme idea of wanting to amalgamize all countries to believe in their political theologic arguments, and also countries like China, where they would like to see a sort of Chinese form of socialism spread throughout the world. This idea of we all sharing the same culture in theory sounds good. In practicality, I can see major problems with it.
Mm.
Okay, so I would agree with that, Mark. I would definitely agree. And I would say that we need to fight for the right of every single individual to enjoy what they want to enjoy. If they want to enjoy a Sunday roast, which I think is the right way to enjoy a Sunday, of course, because I would think that, then, let's go ahead and be right, but let's not discriminate against the people who want to eat curry, which we know is the wrong way to do it, but they have their right to do it the wrong way. I'm saying that in a light-hearted way, just to make that explicit here. All right, so I do actually believe with you that at a surface level, we have huge amounts of differences, and I believe that those should be encouraged. I'm talking about a much more fundamental level when I talk about the common culture. I'm talking about things like respect for the other person's life, don't lie to the other guy, don't kill people, don't steal other people's stuff. That's the culture that I'm really talking about. I know it sounds like globalism, and I think this is one of the scary things, like anarchism has been destroyed in people's minds as an option by using very clever and subtle propaganda. So these ideas of coming together as brothers and starting small communities is being destroyed by people who are trying to undermine it by comparing it to globalism, knowing that people have got issues, genuine issues, with how these current globalists are trying to impose a non-elected governments on us. I think elections are a terrible idea. I think they're a very terrible idea, and that they steal people's power away. But I think that it's the only tiny little piece of power that we have at the moment is by carrying on going to the ballot box. And we do not want these non-elected bodies to take that away from us. We want to transform the system from our hearts, from you and me, what we're doing, not like some rich guy in a Lamborghini tells us that we need to eat bugs.
Just reminds me of the old Winston Churchill expression saying the best form of politics is democracy, or democracy is the best form of the worst.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. Worst
form
of the best form of, and something I feel like throwing in here.
Hold up. You don't have to throw it in there. This is your turn to do your topic.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, one of my favorite guys on the internet, although he's behind a paywall, and that reminds me, I have to get past that. A guy by the name of O.C. Shore, and he talks a lot about Aristotle. And he did a very interesting video, and I think I might have it posted on mine. If not, I will. He has given me permission to post his videos. And he talks about, say there are no cultures, only culture. And basically the way he puts it is that no matter where on the planet in time and space you live, there are going to be people who are cultured, people who live an intellectual life, people who are look beyond their everyday. And that this has been changed because there are different societies. They started talking about different cultures and looking at all the specific differences. But he says, and this is just his idea, but a definition that he likes to use is culture is anyone from any place that is getting past, just subsistence thinking and subsistence living, when you only think about how to get through the next day. There are people that refine themselves, they have more intellectual pursuits, and this is culture no matter where you are. But then, of course, there are going to be very, very great differences between people. And, listening to what you were saying, Bob, about, us all, holding hands and singing the Coca-Cola song. And I know that's not what you said, but they came across that way. You're talking about a deep fundamental, I don't know if that's quite the metaphor, but let's say that there are things that we all do have in common. Obviously, we're humans, we're mammals, yada, yada, yada. I really think that our cultural differences, our ethnic differences, our regional differences are very, very, very deep. And I think they really are part of our identity. And I think that we have evolved, because I think most mainstream biologists would say that evolution can happen very rapidly in terms of tens of thousands of years. I mean, those guys out in Russia with the foxes, I think, what was it, 75 generations? They had produced, significant changes. So that's a pretty short time on a geologic scale. So I think there are differences that are very deep, and very importantly, they're just as valid in that time and place, because remember, evolution isn't about being better or worse. It's about being best adapted to where you live in time and space. So to try to get people to change, like, you were saying, Bob, no, this is really part of somebody's, biology even sometimes. So I go with that. But at the same time, again, this is getting back to what we were saying about having a common culture. Culture has to do with the mind. It doesn't have to. A cultured person is thinking differently and transcending just their physical bodies and their race and their racial characteristics and their climate and the amount of sunlight they get and the food they eat and all these things. So that's where, when we have things like the internet and we're all talking with each other, we're all going to have a completely different Sunday dinner, and some of us are going to have a Saturday instead of a Sunday. We're transcending time and space here. I think we're all in different time zones right now, all four of us. And so yeah, that's always going to be there. But we're talking, our minds are meeting, and we can discuss ideas, and we can apply these ideas to wherever we happen to be living in time and space. It's going to be very different from the internet. And again, I go on about this, and Bob's heard me, but the internet is a wonderful, powerful thing and very important to all of us. But it is really just a very, very, very thin film on human life, both in time and space. Huge numbers of people have very little to do with it, aside from like having to pay bills and stuff like that. And many have none at all. A lot of people don't have electricity, for that matter. So yeah, I think what we're doing is fun, exciting, and important, but I don't know how influential in the bigger sphere of things. I mean, it looks very influential where we're at because all of our websites and newspapers and talking heads tell us it is. But really, one good EMP and all this stuff is gone. I was actually just, this guy that he's a historical revisionist, does Egyptology. Wonderful channel, History for Granite. I advise anyone to take a look at it. And he was talking about the problem they have with data now. In the old days, if you were Flinders Petrie or what's his name, Howard Weiss, and you went out to measure a pyramid, you wrote this stuff down. It might have been published. If it wasn't, it was preserved, but certainly nobody ever thought of hiding it. Now he was talking about they've got some really exciting measurements that they've done of the pyramids. He's an architect guy, so he wants to know where every bloody stone is. And they've done measurements and photographs using top laser and all this stuff, technology. You can't get it because they only did it to do a TV show, and they decided no one would want to buy it, so it's not for sale. And as he said, Flinders Petrie never said, well, I'm not publishing. It's so he can go to a museum and read the journals of these guys and get some of these measurements. And some of the measurements of the pyramids that are available date back to the 19th century. Nobody's done any work since then except for these electronics guys. And as he says, online, if that's not shared, it's all locked away in somebody's server. It's going to be gone in 20 years. I mean, unless it's spread around, because that's the only longevity of the internet is spreading it around. And like I say, one good EMP. But if you have it on paper, that's there for centuries sometimes. So yeah, our internet makes us feel more important than we are. And that's not to say that we aren't important. We're all micro influencers here, secretly famous, as I lay. And we are the influencers of the influencers of the influencers. That's why nobody's ever heard of us, and they shouldn't. Because, but yeah, that's my little joke. But even so, this internet thing, it's a wonderful toy, but I try not to take it too seriously. I guess that's my say.
All right, that was pretty good. So
Thanks.
this is where it gets complicated because Bob Dub was the one the last comment on Mark Edworthy, but it comes back around to her to where she can make a comment concerning what you had to say, Otto. So
Okay.
I think you guys asked for this because like she just
Yes.
gets fired up and she just starts giving you a butt whooping, and it's like you called it Coca-Cola, dude. I mean,
He
like
called him Coca-Cola.
you asked for it. Whatever she says is on you, man. So
It's on you, bro. So,
go ahead.
Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola.
No,
How? How
hang on,
could you
wasn't
equate me?
wasn't that a Mamas and Papas song?
The,
Wasn't that originally released as a Mamas and Papas?
Yeah. It was a pop
Yeah,
song that
yeah,
the
super.
Coca-Cola. Yeah.
Okay,
And of
but
course, I
Okay,
couldn't
look
so
it
convince
up.
myself. And I
If we're
said, I
gonna
know
have a
you didn't
fight,
mean that, but
if
it
we'll
we're
talk
sounded.
about we
we're,
will talk about Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola.
Original recipe.
Coca-Cola spends, yeah, all its money on advertising. And it got to a place where it decided that it was well known now, and so it stopped advertising, and its sales crashed through the floor. And so it had to start advertising again. And they discovered from that that the thing about advertising, the only thing about advertising that works, is keeping the brand name in the mind of the population. That's the only point of advertising. And so the people who made that song, the Coca-Cola song, of a huge group of diverse people standing on a hill, being happy, holding hands. The only thing they want from you is to poison your body with sugar and take your money. That's what they're happy with. So, like, I am not a Coca-Cola song, Otto, thank you. I don't want us to stand in the sun and be happy and sing. If it was going to work, we would have to be small communities. And if we were going to link with other people, it would not be by holding hands, because we would know that the other community was fundamentally a rival community. Just like when you have a family and you have 4 siblings, 2 siblings, whatever it is, those siblings fight with each other like cat and dog. They love each other, they live in a house, they fight for the attention of their parents, for the resources. This is a basic human instinct. We cannot transcend our materialism. We have a brain that only works in one way. So we need to know when we're implementing systems and when we're choosing things, what we're going to choose. Are we going to model our thinking on an advertisement that's out there to rip us off and to manipulate our minds to get us to smoke cigarettes and drink Coca-Cola, and I won't go off into my hobby horses? Or are we going to break away from this propaganda of the corporations, of consumer capitalism, because it is this small group of people who are controlling politics and controlling the economy and controlling the globe and controlling us as an individual level, our ability to think, to be mentally healthy, to interact with each other, to make these connections, to be brave enough to talk out against the rich men with all their money. To sit here having these little conversations, knowing that somebody could come and knock on our door one day in 20 years' time, because we dared to have an opinion today. So I think that I object to being compared to a Coca-Cola advert, when I think that what I'm trying to bring to the table is a really sincere, genuine desire to look at humanity and see what it is we are capable of, and then maximize what it is we are capable of, not try to agitate to the working class to seize control of the economy and fix everything. Because there's still going to be tarantulas, there's still going to be boa constrictors, there's still going to be people who drop bombs on you. This is a hard, difficult planet, and life is suffering. So we have to come together. And so I think that we need to be aware that what we're doing is vital, is vital. If just one person can stand up, and if just one person can have the good idea that sparks the next idea, that sparks the next idea, that brings in this new age of the freedom that we've been wanting since the first monkey took our berries away in the first cave. Okay, thank you, Roger. I'm done.
I can't believe it went from Coca-Cola to monkeys in the freaking jungle.
This is me. I have the talent.
Okay, so now that she has said her response, do you have anything to say to that, Otto?
Well, I will admit that we have a new sponsor with the Coca-Cola Company, and we are introducing banana flavored Coca-Cola. So thanks everybody for being on. I think I think Bob knew I was being facetious when I was talking earlier, but her point is well made. Her point is well made.
So now I'm gonna give my take on it. And you mentioned some things too that stuck out to me, and it was one thing is culture. Everybody's been throwing this word about culture up, and like I had a really well, I really didn't have any understanding of what cultures really were, until I got into history and not just like Middle Ages and stuff, going back thousands of years, and I had to
Right.
figure out what a culture was compared to society. You know, um, back in the beginning, they didn't consider society starting out until they found a culture that actually developed the ability to write. So, with the first signs of writing, that's when society and civilizations started. I wouldn't say society; I'd say civilizations. But cultures were around way before any of these. Anything about civilization was around. Basically, they've been around forever, and it took me a long time to understand that. And the thing about freaking cultures is they have migration patterns. Okay, it has nothing to do with borders. It has nothing to do with anything because cultures have been known to migrate from one area of the planet to another. And we were having a conversation with me and another group of people about language, how important language is. And I'm not talking about writing it down on paper, but the words that come out of our mouth. And how important that is with linguistics and everything. And they can take language and they can literally track the migration habits of everybody that's on this planet just by the words that come out of their mouth. And that has to do with culture. So when it comes to culture, I really don't buy into the whole border thing. You know what I mean? When the United States started up, nobody cared about who came over that border. All of a sudden Staten Island came up, and then the next thing you know, we had the New Deal, where frickin' they were going to take away the gold standard and give us fiat money. And all of a sudden, it was important to know who was coming from where, and some uh, for some people, their names actually had to be changed in Staten Island on top of that because it didn't fit in with the way we did things around here. And that was all that was all directly responsible for freaking socialism coming to the United States. We had to start implementing this stuff, and people call nationalists and stuff like that a far right, quote unquote far right, uh, thing, but they're still socialists. You know what I mean? They still follow these ways of thinking, and I think that people really do need to have a better understanding of what they're saying when they say cultures. It shouldn't be about keeping people out. It should be about actually learning how to live with one another. We have so many Irish people here in the United States, it's pathetic. And why we have that is because we didn't turn them away. Now we do. Now we turn the Mexicans away. Now we turn the Irish away. We turn anybody away because of any just bullcrap excuse for doing it. And I don't agree with that. Also, before I stop responding to your comment, I would love to hear you uh, give us a little information on the example you gave last week. I forgot the guy's name. It was Ball or something like that. Maybe kind of go over some of his stuff too, because I thought that would have been interesting to hear about this week. So I'll shut up.
Oh, John Ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a medieval figure. The reason I bring him up sometimes is T.H. White used to joke about him. Um, he making him a sort of an anachronistic figure, but he was basically a lordist. He was part of he was involved with the peasants' revolt. Not that they didn't have a lot of those, but the one in the 1380s, and he was the guy that said, and it is a very, very, I think you can say this has a little more than a little taste of class warfare to it. Very famous little poem, which was, when Adam delved and Eve span, who then was the gentleman? In other words, why do we have nobles and gentlemen who are somehow superior to us when we are all descended from Adam and Eve? When Adam delved, when he dug, and Eve was spinning on her wheel doing her work, well, who's the gentleman then? And that's the father of the human race, and venerated in their religion. So yeah, he was. But I mean, it's peasant revolt stuff. They didn't have a proletariat or anything like that. It just had to, I'm not sure what this particular revolt was about, but it probably had to do with changing economic conditions, plagues, enclosures, all the sort of thing, and people getting too big for their britches. The popular revolt has always been part of the checks and balances in these systems, whether it was acknowledged or not. The Romans acknowledged it. I was talking about that before. Senate and people of Rome, the people themselves, if they decided not to join the army, they were screwed. I mean, if the whole populace or if they didn't farm, I mean, yeah, it probably wasn't going to happen, but they were worried. The Senate would still worry about shit like that. Give them tribunes. Give them bread and circuses eventually. And I like with Dutton pointing out, by the end of the Roman Empire, you had the entire citizenry basically getting free food and wine, watching gladiatorial games most of the day, and all the work was being done by either foreigners or slaves. And often the two were the same thing. And it was just financially untenable. I mean, they could afford it because the empire was still bringing in enough to keep Rome happy. And of course, even though you always lost money from a financial standpoint on Rome, it was very important politically. That's how you got to be emperor. Although, there was a point where being emperor was basically you'd be dead within a few months. I mean, I don't know why anyone would want that job. I'd want to be the head of the Praetorian Guard. They seem to be the guys that were changing emperors, whatever. They actually didn't they put the office up for auction once, I think, and made the highest bidder emperor. It was that open at one point. It was just so brazen.
Just so you
Uh,
know, you're being streamed on the Praetorian.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
See, the Praetorian, the power behind the throne, at least at one point in Roman history. Yeah.
yeah. So now, are you done with my rant?
Yeah, yeah, I'm with John Ball. I don't really know a whole lot about him, but basically he was a medieval guy who was, you could call him a proto-communist, definitely a proto-socialist.
Okay.
Um, but again, I think that they wouldn't have been thinking in economic terms. They would have been thinking in religious terms.
Mm-hmm.
They would have been thinking in social terms, possibly. But they didn't they didn't know from class struggle, actually. Well, class in the sense that they were opposed to the noblemen. They were simply the ones that had the money. And this was also, again, a time when a lot of people felt that the old standards, the old obligations were being ignored, like the man that didn't have a greasy enough gate. Especially after, like, the Black Death, there was a lot of war, and people were just very displaced. And all you need is a couple of bad harvests, and suddenly you got an army of starving peasants, and the regular checks and balances all break down. And the parent can't take care of that many hungry people. And so yeah, it doesn't take much to go from there, especially when you see a well-fed lord. Nothing like hunger. We don't see that much here in the United States and actually most of Europe. I mean, yeah, there's hungry people, but we don't have the mass hunger that a bad harvest could make when you literally have an army of people who are hungry and willing to do anything to get food sweeping across the land. That I can't even imagine that. Just and that was John Ball. He was leading them, or at least was part of that.
All right. So now we come to the fun part. I think we come to the fun part. Mark, you have Anything that you want to respond to Otto about with the comments he made?
I was just thinking John Bull being a sort of, rather than a pre-socialist or pro-socialist, as he mentioned, I'm thinking it was more of a sort of pre-reformationist, I don't know, I want to say Lutheran, but that's probably incorrect. But yeah, pre-reformationist,
Yeah,
a pre-Locke or Smith character, I think. Um,
yeah, he really would have had a religious. I think he hung out with Wycliffe.
hmm,
So
That's it. Like
hmm.
like English people don't really say much. You ever notice that? Like that was the best he could. That's it.
well, it depends on the Englishman, you know. I mean,
Oh yeah,
no,
we of little words.
no. I know Otto did his. Now I believe it's Bob Dub's turn to come up with her uh, talking points. Like I said, if you just anything in this conversation that stuck out to you that you really want to pinpoint and bring out in your time,
Hmm.
go for it.
Thanks. I think that the thing that's really important to me is personal responsibility. And I feel going to your point, Otto, where you say when Adam delved and Eve spun, where then was the gentleman? The question is, how come you've risen up and you're trying to rule over us and abuse us and get stuff out of us? Because the answer to that question is that Adam was the gentleman. Adam was the guy who had integrity, who went out, who dug in the earth and provided for his family. That is what an actual gentleman is. And when we have a class of people who behave as if they think they're gentlemen, but they have none of the refinement or the sensibilities of actual gentlemen, that's when the system is broken. We don't need a political class that is corrupt to the core to try and milk the lower classes. That is not what a gentleman is. That's taking a word and putting it onto somebody and pretending he's that, but it's a lie. An actual gentleman is somebody who, in his heart, is gentle, gentle in the true sense of the word. There's a very interesting man who's running for president in America, and his name is Dr. Shiva. And I think that he's a bioengineer. Anyway, he was trained in systems theory, and he's very interesting to listen to. And one of his ideas is that in a society, we have three groups of people. We have 30% of people who are not interested. They are the people who won't work, basically, the ones we were talking about earlier. There's 30%, there's nothing you can do to motivate them or get them involved or anything. They're like a dead weight on society. There are 50% of the society who just get on with life. They go to work every day, they look after their children, they just do what they're told. They're what people mockingly call sheeple. They're just the good people trying to get ahead. And then there's 20%. And there's 20% who are politically active, who really care, who get into ding dong conversations and battle with each other over what is the right way to think. There are people who figure these things out and are deeply invested in moving society forward, according to Dr. Shiva, right? So there's a very interesting talk that Dr. Shiva does where he talks about how we're going to awaken the sheep. Because obviously, this is the thing that you must do. You want to change society. So you want your 50%, your sheep, to be all on board. So how are we going to reach these sheep? And the conclusion of his speech is that we're not going to reach the sheep. What the sheep do is follow. So what they need are people to follow. So within us, within the 20%, the ones who care and are involved, we need to rise up. We need to have a system that the 50% want to be in. You don't need to sell it to them. You don't need to agitate for them. You don't need to have a revolution. You don't need to change their minds or awaken them. You just need to present them with something that's going to change their lives. So I think, for instance, to back up my point, I think of the automobile. Like, everybody said it wasn't going to work. It was a stupid idea. We were all going to kill each other. We can't get in big metal things and drive them around. Ridiculous. And the cell phone. Why would anybody want a cell phone? You've got a phone in your house. Why do you want to carry your cell phone to work with you? And yet, both of these things, despite what people said, that how bad they were going to be for society, they have been adopted by the 50%. So from Dr. Shiva's point of view, it's a system. And everybody in the system is connected to each other. And so when there are groups of people like us who want to be authentic and who want to have integrity and who really care about the working class and each other and the upper class and every random little person there is, from darkest Peru to Buckingham Palace, everybody has a part to play. And each one of us changes the people around us by being the gentleman, by having integrity, by doing the right thing. And so, in my opinion, we need to shed the idea of ideologies making a difference. And we need to encourage the idea of one man who behaves properly, changing the entire world. That's my talking point, Roger.
That's good. So,
Thank you.
I guess it would be my turn after you. Um, the things that I wanted to say, first of all, the primaries are pretty much over with. I think he dropped out of
Oh,
the
did he?
campaign.
Oh,
So, but
Yeah.
okay.
I don't really want to get into like the whole political realm of today's elections and stuff. I will say that I do vote, and I agree with you on that. With that's a little bit of that we do still have. I think we've actually had a conversation about that before too. You know, like that's the only thing that we really have left when you stop and think about it, because the world is so full of freaking special interest groups. Is the best way to call it. You know, we call it a lot of different names here, which aren't always nice, but that's pretty much what they are. They're special interest groups. And it seems like if you want things to really be done here in the United States, you have to be a part of some special interest group, and that's one of the big issues that I have with socialism is it's been manipulated and turned into this kind of system, as you talk about, where it can be manipulated and used by the masses, and the individual seems to be the one who gets left out. You know, I believe in the individual. I don't believe in the greater good. You know, the greater good is what my personal opinion is when it comes to what caused the most death in this planet. When people say, "Oh, we need to do this for the greater good," well, let's talk about the greater good. What is the greater good? Is it what you define as the greater good, or you define, or me? Or, I mean, who determines what the greater good is? You know, I think autonomy is very important. You know, instead of everybody running out and wanting to get on the internet and worry about, you know, freaking having freaking encryption and all this shit. Maybe they should freaking make it to where they're doing something that's autonomous and separate from the mainstream, but instead they want to get on the internet and go in all these directions and become a part of the community. which really isn't the community according to your standards. You know what I'm saying? Because I know you're talking about a different kind of community. You're talking about like like what we've always been talking about, a group of people that get together and we're actually talking like about issues that we're all interested in, and it starts there. You don't worry about Joe Blow, who really doesn't like what we're talking about. I don't care about Mr. Joe Blow if freaking he's not interested in our conversation. I'd rather him not even hear it, because all he's going to do is going to ruin his day, and he's just not going to want to hear it. So it's just better that he goes and he runs around with his buddies and they talk about their thing and just don't even worry about it, when it comes to our conversation. And that to me is a community. We're in a community where we all enjoy talking to one another, and that's it. And to be honest, Mark even had it happen to him. You start talking and it's like magical, and you get hypnotized by it, and you start losing track of what's being said. It went from just you having a serious conversation to being magical, Bob Dub. And I forgot almost 3/4 of everything you said just listening to you, because it's like there is absolutely no way to remember everything you say from the beginning of your conversation to the end, because it's just like you say it perfect. You know what I mean? That's the best way of saying it. It's really amazing. I always love hearing you talk, even when you're mean to these two.
I'm sorry when I'm mean. I don't be mean on purpose. We mustn't actually ever ask me to be mean on purpose. Sorry, I'm mean.
But it was magical. I love it. I love hearing it.
Thanks,
I mean,
Roger.
because you bring up good points. I think that you should do more of it, because you have a lot of important things that need to be said, and a lot of people need to hear it, because you do come up with good stuff that needs to be discussed. So I'll shut up and I'll let Mark come in. Or no, you, and then back to Mark.
Me, and then back to my. I don't have anything more. There was one thing that I was wanting to ask Otto, and that was something that
Well,
Otto, you
well,
talked to
hold
me.
on then. Hold on.
Okay.
Let's wait till Otto comes back around, and then we'll get
Oh,
him into
okay.
it.
And then we'll ask him then. All right. That'll be
Then it's
so.
my
I'll
turn.
keep
You'll
my
ask
time
me.
for then.
That'll start my turn. Your question. So we'll
Yeah.
go to Mark.
Go to Mark.
Right?
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Um, uh, Bob Dub, Bob Dub mentioned about the so-called 20, 30, 50% sort of ratio. What we are seeing at the present moment is those that can say loudest will get their attention. I mean, in the UK, I'm seeing a lot of political ideology being pushed, being enforced by small lobby groups, but lobby groups that can actually shout loudest and claim that anybody disagrees with them must be the far right. So I'm not sure if the sort of 50% normies are going to follow what is the best for them, and thinking that they are going to follow what is being enforced upon them. Also, lobbying involves money. And as my example earlier with the Mars Corporation and the US government, if you've got enough money, irrelevant if you can say loud or if you want to stay in the background, you can grease a few people's hands and things happen. Oh, I don't know. The greater good concept scares me. Uh, as Roger mentioned, a lot of bad things, a lot of deaths have been created due to the greater good. Thinking of both Nazism and extreme left-wing socialism, especially left-wing socialism in this concept. Yeah, so it needs to, the idea of socialism needs to be tempered with the idea of individualism and individual rights. Oh yeah, and one more thing, the tangents thing. The seeing about going down tangents is easily done, and I am as guilty as any other person of doing this. But it's something that I've actually taken away from moderating rooms such as the Canaries chattering for minds. Is there needs to be at least somebody there to be able to make sure that the tangents do not go too far, and you still got control of where the discussion is flowing to.
Is that it?
Mm, that's all I've got. That's all I'm thinking of at the moment.
Now, do you have anything that you want to say, Bob Dub, concerning what he mentioned?
It's fascinating, Mark. It's so fascinating. I'm not bringing anything to the conversation that's been proved. The things that we're talking about, that you're talking about with what's happened in the world, these are things that we humans have tried, and we've got certain results, and we're sitting with certain problems. The ideas that I'm bringing are not things that have been implemented. They're things like you mentioned with your experience of moderating in the Canary group. They're these things that we're doing in this new environment. We're trying to learn how things work, like bots, for instance. You know, we haven't figured out how to deal with that sort of fraud. So, yeah, so a lot of what I say will fall away in the next 100 and 200 and 300 years. And people will say, oh, Bob Dub, she thought she knew things, but God, she was so stupid, really. But the thing is that we have to start somewhere. We have to start having the conversation. We have to start talking about how we're going to deal with these problems that you're bringing up, because they're very valid. Yeah, very valid. And it's what we're trying to get away from, and it's what we haven't yet been able to do. And so there is going to be some sort of revolutionary thought that pops into the mix in the next however many years. And I'm hoping that somebody will come up with the solution, or maybe the AI, something maybe. The thing that you mentioned about money is great. There's an amazing book called Debt by David Graeber. He says that what we are dealing with when we talk about economics is not money. Money is merely a physical thing that we put our concepts onto. What we're talking about when we're talking about economic exchange comes right back down to the social debt that we have to our parents for bringing us up for free, for giving us clothes and food, and we can never repay them. And we have to work our whole lives to put ourselves in a situation so that when our parents are old and they can't feed themselves, we then pay them back. So, this transaction, these social transactions are not about money. And bringing fiat into the equation has destroyed the bonds of debt between people. And this is another reason why we need to transcend economics, and we need to try and find a system that functions in accordance with human nature. There, that's I think that's
It's I think that's pretty amazing. I mean, what do you think, Mark? You like that?
Yeah,
I
I
think.
agree that money is to say, or fiat money, but I won't say fiat because we get into the entire argument of what is digital currency and blah. But yeah, I can see money being just a tool in this concept rather than the actual sort of goal.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
now it's Otto's turn. Boy, you're gonna get it, Bob Dub. You're gonna get it good.
Yes, I think so.
Well, just thinking about what Bob was saying about the reciprocal nature of parent-child relationships traditionally. This, of course, was one of the crises when more modern thinking, thoughts about these things was substituted for the inherited wisdom when they did the Cultural Revolution and the People's Republic. They had the one-child policy, and now they have a huge problem because they don't have any old people's homes. They've never needed them. The family always took care of its own. There was no this. This was something completely outside of Marxian economic theory because it was an unpaid activity and so therefore didn't exist apparently or was negligible, like housework or raising, all these other things that actually are of great value in human society. But that aside, that is supposedly one of the reasons why this is in Minecraft, that they were planning on something that would happen that would basically eliminate a lot of older people from the population of China and freeing them up from this problem. But I do believe they've stopped the one-child policy for some time, so they're hoping to catch up again. But yeah, the point is a lot of these activities never were economic. And it's difficult when your viewpoint of the world is economic in nature. And when you try to, as I've said before, and this isn't just socialist, any kind of a government you want to talk about that gets more authoritarian, tries to mimic these smaller communities. Because again, this is something that you're talking about is something that has to function within a situation where it's able to function, where there's a great deal of things that are very flexible, very ambiguous, that there isn't any paperwork filled out, that there's no definite, it's a yes, no, or maybe situation. It's, well, maybe, come see, come saw kind of deal. And this is the lived experience of the vast majority of people for most of their lives, and families and people took care of each other. They really did. And of course, there are difficulties as things get larger and larger. And I'm thinking of, again, Renaissance England, where you started having large groupings. You had things like the parish, of course, but even a great, metropolitan area like London would still have like different areas of demarcation, and they would try to, compartmentalize authority to a certain extent. And then, of course, the crown itself had the verge. And of course, we were talking about the coroner's jury for Christopher Marlowe, and how they had, the one coroner for the verge, but then you also had to have the county coroner or the local coroner for the local community, or was he the same guy, which was a little irregular and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they were trying to hang on to those old systems, or the jury system, which, as I understand it, and I'm not a great expert on this, but the original old jury system was an organization of every village into groups of 12 men, and true, but 12 men, and their duty was to report any crime that they were aware of amongst that group of 12. That was the real thing about trial. And in that way, if you were brought to trial, you were brought to trial really by your peers, by the people that lived with you and who would know. And of course, they would get in big trouble if they didn't tell. I always thought that was a very, very interesting social organization.
So interesting.
So
but these are pre-industrial ways that society organized itself.
Yes.
Although I would say the jury system, I should look into that more. I don't really understand its origin so much. In part, it almost sounds like if I was an invader, I would impose this on everybody. All right, you're all in groups of 12. And if anything happens, it almost sounds like, the old stories, like the partisans, if they do anything bad, they're going to kill 10 hostages or whatever for every one German killed or whatever. So yeah, I don't. Mark, do you know anything about the origins of the jury
I
system?
I think it's related to the Magna Carta. These are
Huh.
back in the 1868
No,
9
no, hold on,
after the
hold
Bill
on,
of Rights.
hold
I
on.
think Magna Carta.
Hmm.
This gets interesting because now we do the strange thing. Okay, now before Mark makes comments on what you said, we'll open it up to Bob though because she needs to kind of give you a
Okay.
response on what you'd said, and then after that we'll do Mark because I think Mark will probably know this. Well,
Okay.
actually, I know a little bit about it too, so I'm supposed to be before Mark, and I can kind of say something too. So see what do you have to say about what he just said, Bob? Though, because this is good.
Yeah, it's good. I think that system of peers, that's the thing that's what I would say would be the basic unit of a community, would be those 12 men, that stick, that the brotherly love, the thing, those guys. So what used to happen in these societies where there were little tiny small family groups, there was no concept of money, there was no concept of trading. There was just duty to each other, debt to each other. And so if you had two pairs of shoes and the guy next door lost his pair of shoes, your 11th man of your group, you would just take him your shoes. You wouldn't even think about it. There would be no trading him shoes or taking his jacket. It's just, oh, look, I got these extra shoes. And then things got big and they started being rulers. And then the rulers started taking advantage. And one of the things the ruler of the community would do was that he would insist that when there was a new marriage, that for the debt of his protection of the land, that woman would spend her marriage night with him because he was the ruler. And so it started being manipulated and abused. And we didn't like it. We still don't like it. How money came into the equation was when communities who did not know each other started trading goods with each other, and they didn't want the goods that the other guys had. They didn't want shells on the seashore, and they didn't want interesting carved sticks. They wanted something else, so they would trade their goods for money with a community that didn't know them. So money isn't part of a community's life. Communities trade with each other on a principle of debt and what we owe each other because we love each other, or we need each other. You're part of our 12, you're part of our jury. We need you to be healthy. So we're talking about two different systems here. We're talking about a system between people who love and respect each other and want the best for each other, and we're talking about exchange between groups who have no loyalty and no trust to each other. It's important to keep these concepts very carefully separated, in my opinion. That would be the thing that what you were saying. That's how I would respond to your opinion there, Otto.
Okay, do you have a do you want to comment on that, Otto?
Yeah, actually, I like your point about the jury system because I was just discussing, like, possible, what revolves around the idea of having 12 people responsible for each other. And of course, my first thought is, well, they got to report each other's crimes, but also they're going to be a support to each other not to commit crimes. I mean, if someone was actually thinking of doing something really bad, like stealing a cow in the next village, or I don't know, or even committing an assault or a murder, you'd need Confederates. All these guys know that they're all going to be held responsible. It's almost like creating a more responsible voice, especially if you're drunk. And it was like, and it's like out of those 12 guys, you're going to have enough of them, hopefully, that are sober enough to say, you know what, this isn't a good idea, dude. Come on. It can be a support to someone as well. And of course, as you do point out, in these communities especially, people were very close. They worked together all the time, and they lived together. They died together. They, if there was a war, they'd all grab their pitchforks and bill hooks and stuff and march off under the local, whoever it was, together. and come back and tell lies about the war together to each other's grandkids. So and people didn't travel, and that that was part of the thing. And not even so much about newcomers or whatnot or anything like that, but just the fact that people stayed put. They were very, very stable, and I mean, you still meet people now that haven't traveled too far. But still, it's like I know somebody that's never been more than 50 or 100 miles from their house. But on the other hand, there are people that never went more than 5 miles from their house all their lives. And that was seen as perfectly. And why the hell would you want to anyway? I mean, really, you've got food, shelter, and a job to do right there. The vacation, what the hell, you're spending money so that you can go somewhere else and, eat the same food and drink the same. I think they'd think it was ridiculous, really. Change of scene, what? It's more cows, what? So
Yes.
Okay, so I'll comment on what you had to say too, because you brought up some things that really stuck out to me. Like the one concept that you mentioned that I really think that should be paid more attention to, and I see it kind of vanishing with a lot of these socialist programs that they're putting out here in the United States, is the fact that not only is the person being accused held accountable, but the person that's making the accusation needs to be held accountable too. You know,
Ooh.
and that goes back. These are old. You could say they're also spiritual principles, but they go all the way back to what's his name, Hammurabi, I believe it is, or
yeah, yeah.
you know
Code
he,
of Hammurabi.
you know he made it very clear that if anybody made accusations against somebody for stealing something and it was found out that they were lying, then frickin' they would have to frickin' pay for what they had done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that also goes into a lot of the laws from that point on in history. And I think that that's probably where the whole concept of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth came from, So that was something that I did want to mention, and I do think that it's a pretty solid law, because today you see a lot of these organizations here, especially the family services organizations, where a person who's your neighbor who doesn't like you can just pick up a phone call, make an accusation about you, and your entire family is in trouble for at least a year because your neighbor didn't like you and was able to make an accusation. You know, I
Yeah.
think
It's shocking.
I think that right there is just appalling and it needs to stop. Not saying that people aren't out there doing bad things, but if those people are doing bad things, they should be dealt with in a criminal law, not with a non-organizational or non-government organization. I think it should be the police dealing with it in a criminal law, with criminal law and a criminal justice system, not all that, But I do see that happening, and I think that that's something I think we covered a little bit of it last year with me and Mark when we were doing a lot of that. But that's something that really stuck out to me when you said that. The accuser should be held just as accountable as the person that's being accused of something. So, um, I guess you can respond to that, Otto, if you wish to.
Oh well, I had sort of a comment talking about justice systems. I was thinking about the Tibetan justice system, and it's not very well known about, but there is an excellent book, and I cannot remember the author's name, but the name of the book was The Golden Yoke. And the person who wrote the book was friends with and studied and fortunately had access to documents through the help of her friend, the Tibetan Minister of Justice. And he was one of the people that fled from Tibet during the communist takeover, and had been a senior member of the Tibetan government, and then later like justice minister. He'd been a judge, so was very, very familiar with Tibetan law, precedent, and all that kind of stuff. And she did tell some interesting stories about how Tibetans just take what we would call psychic things completely for granted. I think she told a story about when she was staying with him or was staying there near him, and her husband was traveling around by bus. I think he was another academic, and you didn't know when anyone was going to. This is no cell phones. This was a while ago, and suddenly one day this guy comes to her friend and says, I had something about he had a dream that your husband will be here tomorrow, so we're going to have dinner at my place. Get yourself ready. And she's like, there's no way. And then he shows up, and he said this is very common to happen among Tibetan people. They take dreams for granted. It's like, oh yeah, well that'll happen, and it does. So. But anyway, she talked a lot about Tibetan law, and like I said, you got to talk to this guy, and I think she talked to some other judges. I read the book a long time ago, but so she had actual examples of Tibetan case law and how it worked, and they had amazing lawsuits. They talked a lot about property, people arguing over property lines for generations, for hundreds of years, and oh, there it is. And one of the interesting things, though, about the Tibetan code is no case can be settled until everyone agrees to it. So you can keep a case going forever. And remember, there's no lawyers, so this is just people. They don't really have much in the way of legal advisors for people. All I have to do is say, no, I'm not happy with it. This is my side of the property line. And it can go on for years and years and years and years. Another aspect of it is that if you're accused of a crime, a criminal code, you can't be sentenced until you confess to the crime. Now, they do have ways of pressuring you to confess. But one of the most interesting things was she had a conversation with these guys about their ideas of arrest and justice and police procedure and ours. And, they don't have the separation of powers. One group makes a law, another group enforces a law, another group judges. It's all more or less their functioning as, the judges have a lot of power, basically, I'm trying to say. So they run the police. And so say you're arrested and they say, well, they're just talking about how they do it. Well, first you go and you get the subject and you give him his arrest beating. Then you take him to the jail, and then he gets his jailhouse beating. And then you leave him there until the judge sees him, and then you give him his pre-trial beating. And then you bring him to the judge, and then the judge hears the case. So it's just the beating. It's the beating. You give them the beating. And she was trying to say, well, what if he's innocent? I mean, then I think first was like, why did you beat him? Well, he's a criminal. He's a guilty man. Well, what if he's innocent of the crime he's accused of? Well, how could that be? Why would he be? Why would anyone accuse them? And it made it very difficult to get through to them the idea that if you're arrested, you might not be necessarily guilty. I mean, it's more than just presumption of innocence or presumption of guilt, or like Roman law ideas about proving innocence versus whatever. They just assumed, so finally she got through to them. She was, I think it was a couple of these judges, and she's like, well, look, what if the person who accused this man and who's been beaten several times by the time he gets to you, what if it's found that they did make a false accusation? What would happen then? And they had to think about it for a while, and then they said, well, we would do everything to them that we did to him. And that's their idea of law. But it was just interesting that well, of course we beat him. He's a criminal. If you're arrested, you are a criminal. You're in that niche. It just seems so bizarre to us. And this is the enlightened.
Good beating.
But a very good book, very interesting book. They had another point she did that I thought was very interesting. Here in the West, or anywhere I've heard of or I've ever lived, if say you're walking along a bridge or you're on a lakeshore and you see somebody struggling in the water, drowning, and you call for help or something, but you don't jump in, and the person drowns. Well, that's a pity, but nothing bad's going to happen to you. In Tibet, you'd be prosecuted. Why didn't you go and help that person? So you have a responsibility to actually help people in danger. I thought that was kind of an interesting case. But yeah, good book.
Man, you just have the most interesting way of responding to my question. I mean that was good, but it was interesting. I'll say that much. So I'm gonna shut up now, and it's Mark's turn. Mark, do you have anything to say about what Otto was talking about?
Just on the last point about the drown and thing, that just reminds me of a legal case that happened. Must have been 15 years ago now or something. In which a teacher was supervising a load of children, and one child got into a pond or a river or something and started drowning. And the teacher didn't do anything. And when it went to court, the teacher was let off due to was the responsibility to aid in the child's life. There was the entire health and safety issue there.
Yeah.
You can subject a teacher to issues that would endanger their lives.
Yeah.
On the duo, 12 men duo thing, it does just remind me of the amazing 1957 screenplay film, The 12 Angry Men.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Some of the greatest actors of the 20th century, I would argue.
Watch that again.
Indeed, I haven't seen it in quite a long time. And that creates a sort of the concept of the 12 good and angry men creates a concept of a community within a community. So you've got the wider society, and then you've got these this subset that is deciding upon if somebody's committed a crime or not. The issue of considering that somebody's a criminal when they're just going to go to court brings up the interesting arguments that we've seen around the so-called hate crime concepts of recent times, in which there is somebody's guilty of a crime if the so-called victim, quote unquote, is perceives them to have committed a crime. Thankfully, we've just in the last couple of days we've seen the First Minister of Scotland, Yusuf, resign from his position, and he. It was only a couple of months ago that he created this piece of legislation in which anybody who is perceived of creating a false crime, if you want to say, against another person, is automatically guilty of that crime. Irrelevant if they meant to, or the irrelevant of context, irrelevant of their thinking process, but if they are perceived to be racially aggravating, then they must be racially aggravating. And that raises a major sort of danger.
Okay. What do you have to respond with that with, Otto?
Actually, I think he's just right now. I think one of the biggest problems we have is this sort of legislation that is just has nothing to do with actually protecting anyone from harm, but has more to do with making political points. And I mean, it makes for a very poor law. It doesn't make anyone safer, and arguably it makes people a lot less safer and a lot more miserable and upset. I mean, this is sort of like, I sometimes think the people that push this stuff are actually deliberately doing it because it's so overtly ridiculous. I mean, maybe I just have clown world eyes. Maybe it has to do with being a certain age or having just basically a certain way of looking at the world. But I mean, to me, it's some of this stuff is so blatantly ridiculous. And it's almost like sometimes I feel like they're like, kids, they keep pushing, push. They want to be pushed back against, and no one will. It's like, the kid is like, well, he gets this piercing, he gets that piercing, and the parents won't say a thing. So, more and more and more until he can get a reaction. Or like I say, maybe they're just really secretly, agents for the other side. I mean, I don't know. It's just, but yeah, no. And the problem, though, I really don't like to see this with laws, because poorly written laws lead to like bad outcomes. And I think we're going to see a lot of bad outcomes with some of the laws rolling off the books. The one in Canada, where apparently they'll be able to retroactively look at what you posted from before the law. Sounds frightening. I mean, that's how I understand it. I don't know how it's actually worded, and it seems bizarre and unlikely, but that's what the clickbait headline I saw said that it's actually something where they can look back at past posts that you've made, and it might get you in trouble one way or another. So that seems a little, things like this, and then using it for political. And come on, we'll be frank about this. Basically, it comes down to a political censorship. The people doing the censoring have political power, and they're doing it for the sake of the power. So no matter what they call it, I think it's related to their political power,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very troubling. It's very troubling.
Okay, so we actually tonight have hit
Uh,
2 hours
sorry.
and 5 minutes. So
Sorry, just one more point. I just was thinking about Jim Otto's thing. There is the other point, the sort of blind justice sort of thing, the like lady justice argument, in which laws should be applied to the population irrelevant of specific subsets.
Yes.
Whereas you see with the recent hate crimes style legislation, you the so-called victim is somebody of a specific subset. There is no sort of blanket requirements there. That makes sense.
yeah, it does. Now, before you guys go on any further, I was going to say we've gotten like 2 hours and 6 minutes in, so I think if you guys wish, let's do this again next week. Let's keep it going. I think we've come up with some
Sure.
good topics, and plus, I mean, I haven't even gotten through a third of my talking points. I'm gonna go in on the chat and delete what I've got on there from to the point that we made it tonight, and I'll do some more of it next week because we haven't even gotten into freaking deflation. Like everybody's always talking about inflation. If we come
Right.
back, I can talk about the reason why they took the gold standard away and the real story
Uh,
behind it instead of all of this mainstream conspiracy theory stuff that you hear. We'll start hearing about what deflation is instead of inflation and how gold deflated the currency.
uh. Well, before we
How
go,
cool.
I found something that relates to what we were talking before about John Ball. I found this. This is a quote from the sermon he gave. He basically, during the Peasants' Revolt, he went and released a whole bunch of rebels from prison, and then he preached them a sermon, and he said the famous quote: "When Adam delved and Eve span, who then was the gentleman? From the beginning, all men by nature were created alike." Now that sounds familiar, huh? "And our bondage or servitude came in by the unjust oppression of naughty men. For if God would have had any bondman from the beginning, he would have appointed who should be bond and who free. And therefore I exhort you to consider that now the time is come appointed to us by God, in which ye may, if ye will, cast off the yoke of bondage and recover liberty." I like that, recovering liberty. They were always looking back to a golden age
Mm-hmm.
of freedom. But that one little bit there, I can see why people would talk about that. All men by nature were created alike. That's very close to all men are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, America's founding document. So
I think you
I
just I think you found a perfect way to end the thing, man. And we need you to do some more readings like that. You are officially our readings guy that comes up with the cool stuff to end the show with.
Well, thank you. I accept.
Okay,
I do my best.
that was cool. So,
Uh,
with that being said, I think we should go around the room and everybody should give a plug for themselves again so that everybody out here, if they are watching us, will know how to get in contact with you and maybe watch your stuff. So, start out with Bob Dub and we'll go around.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. So I'm on minds.com. If you want to talk to me or get in touch with me, I am on minds.com. I put content out on YouTube and BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble. It's kind of around X as well. But if anybody would like to chat, it will be Minds. That will be where I am. And yeah, thank you very much, Roger and Mark and Otto. This has just been a great, great talk. Love being here. So thanks.
Go ahead, Otto.
well, Otto Excelsior here, and I'm mostly, to tell you the truth, these days on Minds.com. And although I do upload stuff to BitChute, I actually most of my most recent and best stuff is going to be found on Bob Dub's YouTube channel. I've got a playlist there. If anyone's interested, I mostly talk about Buddhism or literature or movies well, I talk about all kinds of stuff, but I try to do it from a Buddhist perspective. I also have a small website, navakavada.org, which is basically about Buddhism. And yeah, but minds.com is where you usually find me.
Okay, it's Mark's turn.
Okay, like everybody else there, I'm on minds.com, which is my primary social media, in which I mainly talk about information technology, legislation, concepts, developments, and those other subsectors of that area. But yeah, wines.com/Medworthy.
Okay, Medworthy, especially if you use Medworthy, you'll find them the fastest. Just so everybody knows, because that's how I usually find them. Use at Medworthy, and you'll pop it up real quick. So, and I also want to point out there is the Bob the Bloom, and then the Auto what? What was that word?
Otto Ken. Otto Ken.
Auto can
Yeah, Otto Ken.
tokens, as well as the WoW token, which we are all a part of. If you guys want to, or if you're interested in that and you want to invest into some cryptocurrency or tokens, I'm sorry, I've got to be careful around Mark. He gets real touchy about that. But if you guys are interested in that and you want to learn about that, contact one of us three, and we can set you in the right direction and get you going on that. And you can also find me on here, minds.com, Skype. I guess I'll use that as a reference now. Discord, as well as on minds.com. That's my platform where I usually share stuff, so you can catch me there. I'm on Rumble and YouTube, and I always hang out with these guys. So if you don't see them on their channels, you're definitely going to see them with me, because these are the coolest people to hang out with. I get to hang out with the cool kids now, so and I wanted to do that ending because I ended the last episode perfect. Mark looks right straight in the screen and said, "You forgot to give your plug," and then I hit end recording, dude. And I left it. I left it in the stream because it needed to be there. So with that, I will go ahead and end the episode, and I hope to see you guys again next week, same time, same place.